talking of confounds, especially in descriptive research, we want to think about what's really impacting the study in this case, and especially in something like love, right? So demand characteristics. The definition, I'm not a huge fan of how this defines it. I don't think it's as clear as it could be. Factors in the research setting, so the environment, right? That it might impact participant behavior. So, for example, if I was to do this research and I was asking both people in a couple questions about their love while they were sitting next to each other. That's a demand characteristic because when you're sitting next to the person, you know there are certain answers that they will and won't like. Even if you're both very much in love, how you answer questions could shape how upset or not upset they might be. So it creates this sort of situation that can impact the variables just based on the way the environment's set up. Social desirability is also a good one, right? So in this case, are they telling you the truth? Or are they telling you more of a socially desirable answer? If you look at married couples, right? If you've got people to be very honest, I'm sure there are married couples that would tell you that they're not in love, right? If they're being completely honest. However, if they're not being completely honest, they might tell you a more socially desirable response. And if you've ever seen any of these whodunit murder shows, which I know are very popular, my wife and I watch them, um, if you ever watch any of these, you can usually tell the guilt of someone by how they describe their marriage, right? Especially if it's a spouse killing another spouse. They always want to describe their marriage as perfect. Oh, it was perfect. It was a storybook marriage. And they always start the show, it was a storybook marriage until it wasn't, right? Same idea. Social desirability. They're not going to tell you, well, we fought like cats and dogs, and then one day I just ended it for her, right? No. We also, though, also have a predisposition to have a positivity bias, right? And once again, going back to these murder shows, we see people that are like, oh, yeah, well, she started dating him despite the warning signs, despite the red flags, right? And you might be watching the show thinking, girl, why did you ever start dating that man, right? Because of positivity bias. We have a tendency often, not all of us, but many of us have a positivity bias where we want to see the good in people, right? They just don't know him like I do. I know there's a good person in there somewhere, right? Or she's different around me than she is around other people. Yeah, yeah. Is she? Or are we just deluding ourselves? Once again, potential confounds. Levels of variables too, right? So is love dichotomous? Are you either in love or not in love, right? Is there no gray area? Do you just become in love, right? Or is it more continuous where you are in love, but it grows? Is it kind of a scale where you are still in love, but you can actually love more, right? And where does that threshold start? Who determines whether or not you are in love, right? Is there prior research on it? Do you establish it as the experimenter? Do you let the participants tell you whether or not they're in love, right? And if you are in love, could you be more in love, right? What is the top of the scale? Is there like a maximum love? And I love the Bambi term, twitterpation. Have you achieved ultimate twitterpation? Is it not possible to love someone more? Having loved the same person for 20 years now, I can tell you that you can always love them more. If you'd asked me when I first got married, could you love your wife more? I would say no. I love her more than I love her the most I could possibly love somebody. But I have definitely, and I think she would agree, I definitely love her more now than I did then. How did that happen? I thought I'd maxed out the scale. That is the nature of love, of trying to measure or observe love. Um, but I'm using love in this example, but this could be any number of human emotions. I'm just using love because it's a pleasant one, right? And I think many of us, I think hopefully all of you have felt love in some form or fashion. Um, and I think we can relate. Other issues too. So observational accuracy. When I'm observing or describing a phenomenon, I bring my own bias, right? I need to try and make sure to be very precise and not have bias, right? So for example, as a heterosexual male, if I'm observing a homosexual relationship and trying to decide if that is love, I need to put aside my heteronormative biases and observe it with as much objectivity as possible. In that way, I can improve the observational or descriptive accuracy, right? Also, precision. If I can try and eliminate certain confounds. Um, People that are in love go to IKEA together and fight quite a bit. Not because they're not in love, but because IKEA has certain demand characteristics. I love IKEA, side point, but just so we're clear, it's a good place to go if you want to look at furniture, but also couples seem to love to fight there. Um, Observational bias. This is super important. Do researchers see what they want to see, right? For example, if you were a heterosexual observer and were kind of closed-minded to homosexual relationships, you might say, oh, well, those two men or those two women, they don't love each other. That's not really love. I observed it. It's not really love, right? In that case, are you just confirming what your bias already predicts. Okay. Also, expectancy effects. Essentially, are you inadvertently impacting the results so they fit in line with your hypothesis, right? Now, I use my example of my children here. I've got 4 children now, but 3 of the children are these pictures here. So, my son loves motorcycles. My oldest daughter is in love with Star Wars, and then my middle daughter there on the bottom right is in love with Disney, right? Is it because they did so on their own, or did I inadvertently put my expectancy effects on them because I love motorcycles, Star Wars, and Disney, right? And let's go ahead and reiterate: expectancy effects are considered to be unintentional, but sometimes they're fairly overt, right? I kind of raised my kids to love these things. I kept my son around me when I was working on my motorcycle, right? My daughters I shared Disney and Star Wars with, right? Have I essentially confirmed a hypothesis because I wanted it to be true? This is a big one. So experimental considerations. Mundane realism. Okay, let's start there. How much this experimental setting resembles the comparable real world setting. And I'm going to pick on a TV show here or a TV series, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, right? It's supposed to be, if you think of reality TV in many ways is observational research or descriptive research. But I'm going to go ahead and have you note, those shows have terrible mundane realism. Why? Because it's a rare thing for someone to be living in a mansion and pursued actively by 20 women, or to be pursued actively by 20 men simultaneously, I might add, right? Um, Granted, it's been a long time since I've been on the dating scene, but I don't think you could put all the women that have ever pursued me in my entire life and it wouldn't add up to 20, for sure. Maybe half that at best, right? This is bad mundane realism. It's not very much like the real world. Experimental realism, if you look at this part, how much the participants get caught up or involved in the situation. I will say that The Bachelor and The Bachelorette have excellent experimental realism because you see these people feel the real emotions. Do people really feel rejected if they don't get a rose? Absolutely. Do they start to form romantic feelings for these other people? Yes, I think they truly do. Very good experimental realism, even though it lacks mundane realism. Psychological realism, how much the experiment elicits the same psychological processes that occur in daily life. Yes, I think once again, I think that this ticks the box, that The Bachelor and Bachelorette tick the box in this case. Because what they're doing is they're triggering the psychological response to romantic pursuit or being pursued. I think these people really feel these things, really think these things in a realistic way, despite the fact that the situational realism is greatly lacking. And ideally, a good experiment will have all 3 components. But if you think of something like love, can we truly set up an experiment that has all 3 types of realism so that we can measure and potentially manipulate outcomes such as love? And I think the answer is no. I think the answer very clearly is no. That's why we have to rely on observational or descriptive research to account for something like love. So confounds. What potential confounds? We've already talked about several. What potential confounds might be a factor in this, right? Past experience on behalf of the participants as well as a researcher, right? Have you been burned before? Did you have a bad relationship? Or is the relationship you're in right now a rebound, right? Age is massive. I think we've all been there where we were a teenager, 12, 13, well, I guess that's not a teenager, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that range, maybe even as old as 18, and we thought, this is true love. We're going to be together forever after spending a week with somebody, right? I mean, like, let's be honest. Okay, our definition of love changes a great deal. Culture is massive. The culture we are raised in and the culture we represent really shapes how we perceive love and what real love looks like. Society, even beyond that. So not just the culture, so culture could be ethnicity or race, but society, the society we live in impacts us. Circumstances too, right? Time was you would never even think about starting a relationship with someone you'd never seen before. But people do it every day through online dating sites and apps and things like this, right? Family is massive. Romeo and Juliet. Would Romeo and Juliet have fallen in love if their families weren't enemies? Probably not. The danger and the oppositional nature, the rebellious nature of the fact, probably increased the likelihood that they were going to fall in lust. Let's be honest, right? Timing is also massive. When you meet these people, sometimes we meet the person we're going to fall in love at the time that we need to fall in love with them. right? Attraction is another one, and I'm not going to get into this here, but attraction is a central part of true romantic love. And attraction is also a big question mark. Are we all attracted to the same things? No, no. What attracts people to other people could vary a great deal, right? And we not just in physical respect, but also personality. Some people are attracted to certain personalities that others might completely reject. That's the idea. Okay. Gender too, and gender of course being a continuous social construct. Do people who identify as male uh, love in the same way as those who identify as female? And do those who identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary, do they love in the same way as their other gender spectrum counterparts? The answer is no, but those are all confounds that you have to be aware of. Analysis, finally, let's wrap it up with this. How do we even test? What statistical procedures are we going to use to examine this? Are we going to look at quantitative research on love? Okay, fine. Are we running a correlation? Are we looking to predict through regression? Are we looking for a contrast as far as t-tests? Or are we looking for main effects with regard to ANOVAs? Right? What type of a test suits our research best and will give us the most accurate answers? What are we looking for in terms of qualitative research, right? Are we looking for word choice? Do we look for how often they say that they love the person? I find often that when people talk about how much they love someone else, they're often compensating, right? It's like having to tell people that you're smart. Are you really that smart, or do you want people to think that you are, right? How many words they use to describe their loved one or the love, right? And then maybe how compatible or similar the responses are between two people who are supposedly in love, right? All of these are potential strategies for examining the construct of love, but you see how complex it is. This is why descriptive research, while many people might see descriptive research as easier, I disagree. I think descriptive research is utilized particularly in situations where the construct is much, much harder to measure.